My name is Ross Terry. I am Head of Business Development for Esri UK's Defence, National Security and Public Safety practice. But most of my work at the moment in regards to MOD in particular is around transformation and adoption of the new enterprise agreement. So more around how folk can use the contract that's been signed on that front, along with some of our other larger contracts across national security and public safety as well. I've just seen from Rowley, so if you are having... if you can't hear, you might want to rejoin. Look at the chat. You won't be able to hear my instructions. Everyone's muted. If you've got any questions, if you can put them in the chat, or there's a quick Q&A function. Donna, I think if you can start the recording, that would be great. We'll have a Q&A. We'll aim to save them to the end unless there's something really burning that folk need answered as we go along, and then just put your hand up and we'll see if we can unmute folk. I'm going to be handing over straight away to Tim Murphy and Amy Clark. So Tim and Amy are both from Esri Inc. as in the US. So Tim, as you can see on the screen, there is Director Contextual Intelligence for Esri and the co-product owner of ArcGIS Knowledge, Esri's new graph capability. And Amy Clark is the lead solution engineer for ArcGIS Knowledge. I think we've also got support from Adam Martin as well, from who's a product manager for ArcGIS Knowledge. So if you've got any questions technically, we'll aim to try and address them today. If not, Amy and Tim will be in the UK towards the end of this year, beginning of December. So get in touch with me if you want to hear more. We'll be arranging a series of face-to-face workshops and briefings when they're over in the UK. So aiming to host in London, Andover, and in Witten. So if you've got any questions, fire them into the chat or get in touch afterwards. We'll be sharing the recording afterwards for colleagues. But with that, I think I'll be handing over to Tim.
All right, Ross, thank you so much. And thank you for everybody who was nice enough to join us. Love to see the crowd that we have. This is fantastic. So hi, my name is Tim Murphy. I came over to Esri about 5.5 years ago after meeting with our CEO, Jack Dangerman, and wanted to find ways to be able to help ArcGIS technology to be able to connect data, to be able to find ways to be able to bring spatial and non-spatial data, structured and unstructured data together. And what we're going to be talking about today is a little bit about how we're trying to find ways to be able to solve those problems. Like, our intent is that we believe that you are going to be able to make better decisions when you can look at information in context. And our technology that we are using, or part of our technology stack that we are using for being able to help with that, is this new ArcGIS Knowledge product. So we're going to talk a little bit about this, starting with, we want you to be able to see on the screen as we're looking at all these different ships in the South China Sea right now. As we're looking at all these ships, you can see what's happening, you can see where the ships are. But we also want you to be able to understand why. What is the context around why these ships are there? And this could be ships. This could be giant, very large Excel documents that you're looking at. This could be a spatial or a non-spatial problem, but every analyst I know has had to sit in front of the wall of data. And what they're then trying to understand is, out of everything I'm looking at, well, what should I care about? What are the things that are pertinent to me, my mission, what I'm trying to solve? Essentially getting to the why behind what it is that we're seeing. So ArcGIS already does a fantastic job of being able to look at this from a spatial construct and being able to ask questions like, which ships out of all the ships I'm looking at are nearby certain ports or traveling in ways that they shouldn't be? Which ships are traveling with other ships? What we also want to be able to maintain the context of, though, are the other aspects, those non-spatial connections of those ships. Who are the people that are on those ships? Who are commanding them? What reporting, what unstructured documents are mentioning any of the people, places, or things, so that we can understand all of this information, if you will, in context. So this is the problem we wanted to solve, and at the same time is realizing that we had a demand from the customers for being able to go after this type of data fusion work. Another technology became a little bit more mature, to the point that we felt comfortable trying to bring it into the ArcGIS technology stack. And it's called a graph database. And the easiest example that I can give you of what a graph database is being able to store information in a connected way. On the right-hand side, you're looking at how information typically looks when we take a table-centric approach. We have to have a series of joins for being able to connect all the different things. As you start working into like a real digital twin for being able to understand everything about your world, this becomes extremely complicated, both to manage, but also from a performance level. On the left-hand side, that's the data model for a graph database. We're looking at the exact same thing. In this case, a very simple movie database. Again, very easy example that I'm hoping to be able to use for explaining this part of the concept. And as we're looking at this, we see there's a thing called a person, and there's a thing called a movie. And the person has a series of different relationships going to the movie. Again, the type of thing we would normally be stretching out across a series of tables. So this is how a graph database actually stores the information. This isn't just the visualizations of looking at it like a link chart, but it's physically stored that way. And what that gives you is an ability to ask connected data questions. So in this case, if I want to know who are the co-actors of Tom Hanks, using that relational approach, this is what that query would look like. Using the graph, you can see it's much more intuitive and simpler. I'm going to ask the graph to find me any person named Tom Hanks. Tom was in movies. Other people were in those movies. Bring back the other people. So that's this graph database technology. Bringing that into ArcGIS Enterprise, we've now created a new product called ArcGIS Knowledge, which is a combination of both that graph database technology, but also a series of new user experiences that are everything from visualizations to analytics for being able to bring this information together and make it easier to understand how information is connected, for being able to essentially perform data fusion. And again, we're focused at that enterprise level. Everything you're going to be seeing me do today would be also doable with 10 analysts or 100 analysts or 1,000 analysts all hitting the same graph databases in enterprise. So I might be using some desktop applications as my clients because they are an important part of our experience, but this is all enterprise functionality. And it's designed for being able to bring spatial and graph analysis together, which we'll be talking about here. So first, for people who are familiar with the ArcGIS Enterprise stack, this is what it looks like. And if you're not, I do want to highlight, we're going to be talking about the link analysis, the graph database capability inside of ArcGIS Knowledge for the next 45 minutes. However, ArcGIS Enterprise, if you're not familiar with it, is an advanced analytics platform that is just amazing at spatial data and has a series of different both servers as well as database technologies that are a part of it that make up this ArcGIS Enterprise. For those who are familiar with ArcGIS Enterprise, if you want to install ArcGIS Knowledge, it comes in two parts. The first is the graph server. The second is a database. We provide the graph database as part of our installer. The customers don't have to already have their own graph databases. It's all built in for the installer. However, we're an open architecture. Unlike other systems that do data fusion in the same approach that we take, there's other systems on the market that really go out of their way to hold your data hostage, and we don't. We're a wide open architecture, and that includes being able to work with graph databases that I'll talk about here more in a little bit that are outside of the ArcGIS Enterprise. The one thing I really do kind of want to harp on is that inside of ArcGIS Enterprise, we incorporate the right backend database technology for the right operation, for the right analysis that you want to be able to perform. So in this case, we have document databases in the form of Elastic. We have relational databases for feature services in the form of Postgres, but we also incorporate graph databases as well. So what we're not trying to do, like some other systems do, we're not trying to find a way to contort and mangle all the data to shove it into one particular backend. Instead, we're able to put it in the right backend technology for whatever that data is, including imagery, which I realize I don't have on this, but we can bring that data into the right backend capability and then use that enterprise instance, our APIs, our user experiences, to be able to work with that type of data. One of the first external graph databases that we built a driver for a connection for, is to Neo4j. I particularly like it for the open architecture that Neo4j provides, and they've done an amazing job of being able to create learning materials and help explain graph databases to people. So for any of our customers that have already gone down the Neo4j road, that's fantastic. They are our partner, they are not a competitor. And so our ArcGIS Enterprise instance is able to connect to a Neo4j graph database and either create data inside of it and start working with it in the same way you'll see me working with other data here, but also be able to sit on top of a Neo4j graph database that's already been built and be able to read data from it and do analysis on top of it. So we really like Graph for being able to store data like it is in the real world. The data models become so much simpler for being able to understand the information. And so instead of what we kind of challenge you to do is, instead of thinking about data in rows and columns, you should be thinking about your data as a web or a network of entities that are connected to each other in all sorts of different ways. This is especially powerful when we're looking at phone calls and social media, how people relate to other people, or transaction networks like supply chains, being able to follow an asset or produce going from one place all the way through to the end destination and the journey it took in the process, but also the knowledge networks themselves and content management. We have customers that are using us explicitly for being able to go through unstructured information and be able to find the entities and the locations that are mentioned in these documents, for being able to give them ways to understand what, frankly, they've already learned, but it's become difficult to find that content. I also really like what we're doing with Graph because it's so flexible. It allows analysts who are sitting there who can look at an address, look at a bank account, and be able to say, hey, I know that's dirty. But the other 99 analysts that are looking at that same information, they don't know it or they don't remember it. So what you'll see for what we're doing is, we make it easier for the analysts that you have to be able to add the pieces of information that they know about into the graph to make it shareable for others. There's some fundamental vocabulary that I'd like to cover. The first is that when we start with any of the data that we're breaking apart and so that we can put it together, we start with what we call an entity. I am Tim, I am a person. That's Amy. Amy is a person. We both work for an entity, a company called Esri. And we are connected to that company through a relationship called WorkScore. And then finally, you can have properties on top of the relationships or on top of the entities. And this is where it really deviates very far from what you're used to with the traditional sort of relational table join approach. Because for us, the join isn't just a bridge from one thing to the other. For us, that join is data. And we can affix things like properties onto that relationship. One other thing that's coming out in our new release that's in the next month is this concept called provenance. And what this allows us to do, if you're familiar with ArcGIS Enterprise today, what you're already familiar with is that at the table level, you can set metadata and say, this is authoritative, here's where it came from, it's unclassified, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We have customers who need to be able to do the same thing down to the row level. And we have customers who need to do things down to the cell level. And that cell level is exactly what we're doing in the graph now. This allows us, as I'm looking at this, Tim Murphy works at Esri. As we're looking at that relationship, I have a start date on it, and I can show the multiple different sources of information and the different classifications and even confidence levels that I have on that one piece of information. Because as we bring all this data in from these authoritative data sets that customers trust us for today, and as we bring that information and connect it together, so instead of one feature being spread across 20 other feature services and it becomes one feature one time in the graph, we need to keep track of the sourcing of that information. And that is exactly why we built this new functionality. Entities are, just like we were talking about with the TIM is connected to Esri, which is an organization. Entities come from your feature services. They come from feature layers. They come from tables. They come from spreadsheets. They come from XML documents. They come from any of a variety of sources. And entities can be a variety of things, as you're seeing here. A bank account is an entity. But also what we do a little bit differently inside of the ArcGIS Knowledge product is that an entity for us can also be a region or a location, a bottleneck of a non-named area in between Russia and Ukraine can become an entity. As for relationships, you're used to seeing relationships as things as organizational hierarchy. They can come from dependency maps. For me to build a product, I need the following supplies that come from the following suppliers, and they have their own supplies. But also looking at from communication networks. These are the types of relationships that we're used to. One of the new ways that we'd like to be able to encourage you to think about relationships a little bit differently, and I'm going to be driving this home in a live demonstration I hope to do in a little bit. But what we want you to think about is spatial being able to generate relationships and being able to save those relationships back into the graph for people who have no idea how to use GIS systems, but being able to leverage the work of the GIS analyst in ways that are typically above and beyond, like people like myself who came into the company not being a GIS expert, but would consider myself a link analysis one. So when we start looking at the spatial, we can say, hey, I want to look at a proximity analysis of where people's houses are. I want to understand if they're moving together. I want to understand if they've ever intersected or if the vehicles they've owned have ever intersected. Or I want to be able to ask questions like, is any location line of sight to another location? And this one I'm going to highlight in a little bit later. But this is where I'd really love to be able to incorporate not just the visualization of the analysis, but being able to save the categorical relationship. Building A is line of sight to building B, and we add it into the graph so that we can continue to do that graph analysis with those spatial relationships as part of it. Again, I'll highlight that one a little bit more in a second. So as we bring this information together, what we're used to looking at on the map side, on the spatial side, is obviously all of the spatial information. What I'm used to looking at and what Amy Clark is used to looking at on the link analysis side, on the non-spatial side, we're used to seeing this. We're used to seeing a series of entities that are connected or not connected, but the ones that are connected, they're typically by relationships like phone calls, emails, brother, father, sister, mother, those types of things. However, because we don't have the spatial analysis that ArcGIS can do incorporated into the graph, we miss data. The link analysis users that are not taking advantage of this are frankly in their own silo. So what we want to be able to support is we can take the spatial analysis of who's traveling with who loitered where, and who's like things that are line of sight to other things. We can save those relationships back into the graph. So now from that link analysis perspective, you're able to get the complete picture. But also from the spatial perspective, because you're working off the graph database that is containing the connections between all these spatial and non-spatial things, we can provide the full context for them as well. With all the information connected, you get to ask questions that you wouldn't normally be able to ask. And this is just sort of a top 5 of the types of questions that customers ask us about that graphs are so powerful for. You're used to things like, I want to understand who's connected to who. But then I don't want to spend the time selecting an entity and hitting expand and manually, visually looking for patterns. Instead, I want the graph to do that work for me. In the way that we show pathfinding, you'll see that. But I can also ask, out of ignoring the sort of intelligence aspects just from a marketing perspective, I want to understand who's the most influential person on social media in my region. We're talking about different areas. These are all the types of things that from a graph perspective, we're able to support. So from the architecture, We've already talked about how ArcGIS Knowledge, when you install it, it's going to light up and enable all of your ArcGIS Pro or ArcGIS All Source clients. And when you create a graph, you don't need to know code, you don't need to know Cipher query language, you don't need to know any of the behind the scenes of how this works. You're going to be creating what's going to look just like any other portal item, and it's managed the same way as any other portal item. So if any of your ArcGIS users already know how to go to Enterprise and say, I want to make this shared for a wide group of people, all of that, they can do it the exact same way. We're typically asked, okay, so I'm in, how do we find ways to bring data into it? So first, you can create entities and relationships straight within the application. Next is that we modeled our ability to load data using a one table at a time approach or a feature service at a time or CSV at a time off of other link analysis capabilities as well. So people who worked with other link analysis tools are going to be very familiar with how we could bring data in. The one that I'd like to highlight that not nearly enough people know about is the ArcGIS Data Interoperability Extension. It is absolutely fantastic for being able to, in a no-code way, as you're seeing on the screen on the right, be able to drag and drop objects together that represent data sources and that represent the knowledge graph, and be able to both write to the knowledge graph, but also be able to read from the knowledge graph. And this is where we can set up persistent data load operations. So every night at midnight, bring in anything new from third-party databases and send it into the graph. As I highlighted before, because it's sincerely personally important to me, this is where I really want to foot stomp the open architecture aspect. This is also where the data that we bring into the graph can be used to enrich third-party data sources, pull the data out of the graph and push it into anywhere else that you need it to go. We have a wide open API, and that includes software development kits for both JavaScript and Python. What you're looking at on the right-hand side is using an open source capability for unstructured entity markup, being able to identify and help train an AI model for here's the different entities that I care about in this unstructured text, and be able to then save the results of it into the graph. So by the way, when I say we have an open architecture, I'm not kidding when I say you can, no kidding, right now, go to Google, type in ArcGIS Knowledge API, and you're going to get the full documentation as well as example code for how to be able to bring data into the graph or pull data out from the graph. ArcGIS Pro continues to be just a driving force for us because of all of the analytic functionality that's built into it. And then coming from that, we also have the new all source product that's driving the same capability. We have plenty of users who need to be able to work with this type of graph data from outside of ArcGIS Pro as well. So again, with that wide open JavaScript SDK, you have the ability, as you're seeing here, where some of our professional services, solution engineers have been able to build out these web applications that sit on top of ArcGIS Knowledge. The one I'd like to highlight is the one in the top middle with the wind turbine on it. That's data that's sitting in a feature service, but also has a representation of it inside of the graph database. This is not a take all of your feature services and set them on fire and move all your data into the graph for the graph to be useful problem. Quite the contrary. We see a lot of harmony between leaving bulk spatial data, as an example, inside of feature services and saving the connections, the contextual information in the knowledge graph itself. On the bottom left is an example that we built using JavaScript that we can actually provide to people. Top right is a new example of something called Knowledge Studio. That is our new web-based product. I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. And then on the bottom right, I apologize, that was top right, bottom right is that unstructured Python integration that you already saw. We have a handful of partners I just want to briefly give a quick shout out to who have already spent time working with us and ArcGIS Knowledge. When it comes to extracting unstructured information, my personal go-to is Neto. And this is one of our partners here. I think some of you have already worked with them before. What's incredibly powerful about them is that instead of just extracting out entities, I see named locations, I see named people, etc., they can also extract out relationships. And the relationships are where it could read the sentence, Tim Murphy works for Esri, and it will create the relationship and the two entities for going straight into the graph and then the link chart. And that's incredibly powerful. We work with partners that can help us on entity resolution. So as you have 50 users at the same time that are operating on the same graph, having a capability for being able to help identify that we assert that this company with a slightly different name as another company are actually the same companies using more than just sounds like styles of matches. That's what sensing does. And it's a process called entity resolution. On the right-hand side, you can see this is how the data that we brought into the graph for some loan information, financial information inside the United States. You can see a series of different companies that have all made applications for loans. As we run it through the entity resolution, we're able to identify that we assert that these are actually the same company, and doing the same thing for the addresses on our side for being able to assert that this 1 2-bedroom 3-bath house in the middle of nowhere in Las Vegas is actually the same company or the same address for all of the different borrowers that are all applying for loans. For being able to find that unstructured information to begin with, Voyager Search from the company Voyager, this is one of the other partners that we work with where they can save the data directly into the graph for all the unstructured content that they come across. It's an incredibly fast and powerful way to be able to not just index an ArcGIS Enterprise stack, but to also index the shared drives and everything else around ArcGIS Enterprise on the network and be able to provide that one-stop shop where you can go and search for this information, but then also see how it's connected. We have partners that have already gone very deep on knowledge and they've built just some beautiful applications. In this case, I'd like to highlight Axim Geospatial that was doing work with conflict armament recovery for being able to identify patterns and trends in weapons that were recovered, for being able to identify the supply chain aspects that came along with, is there a new weapons provider moving weapons into an area based off of the forensics of what they were capturing? And they were using the knowledge graph for it, and they just did an absolutely fantastic job. And then this also includes content partners. We have a great relationship with a company called Janes for, you might be familiar with their entire data for order of battle type work. But what I also really like to highlight, because I just think it's fantastic data, this is IntelTrack, and this is looking at financial transactions. So the question that I had on this was, can I find all of the financial transactions that are occurring in China that are being picked up where the other end ultimately is the United Kingdom? And that's exactly what we have here. Starting on the left-hand side and basically asking the graph question, hey, graph, start with Hong Kong, end with any of the areas inside of the UK, go. And it's able to say, here are the companies that are registered back to Hong Kong. Here are the transactions that were the other end of this are companies that are based in the UK, and being able to look at that for additional analysis. So for some of the applications, this is a quick little 2-minute demo that I'd like to highlight. And what we're going to see here, the focus for me on this and why I want to highlight it is it's a combination of some of the partner technologies we just talked about put into a legitimate workflow, and also being able to talk about the enterprise data fusion side of this. So the question was, can we use OSINT, or open source intelligence, essentially data showing up that's available on the internet? Can we use that type of information to have better understanding of things that are going on? And even if we have access to that information, how do we connect it? How do we understand how it relates to the intelligence information that we already have inside of our knowledge graph, inside of ArcGIS? So we start with monitoring this one newsfeed from Taiwan News that was posting daily activities of Chinese aggression into the Taiwan Air Defense Identification Zone. You're looking at the different documents in the middle, the news reports. On the right-hand side, we're looking at the extractions done by NetOwl, being able to look at which aircraft, which things were mentioned in the documents, which were then supplemented by Jane's Defense for us being able to understand what these things are. Looking at a link chart and playing over time, here's the reporting that we have. Here's the aircraft on the left-hand side that were in each daily report. In this, one of the aircraft was a KJ-500, Airborne Early Warning Capability. Because of Jane's defense, we were able to see that it's typically based out of Lingshui Air Base in China. We now move over to Lingshui Air Base, and you're able to see those observations are all coming from the knowledge graph. So as we select any of the things on the map, we're able to understand the context of it from the rest of my enterprise intelligence database. But I can also use this to ask questions. I want to know if these two aircraft are ever in the same time or the same place because it indicates a pattern of activity. As I ask the graph, it's able to, on the left-hand side, find any time that these two aircraft were mentioned in the same documents and reporting, but on the right-hand side, if they were ever in the same satellite image, as you're seeing here. And we can also run this exact same question from a spatial construct. As I look at two dots on a map, help me understand how they're related and what else they go through. There's a lot of applications for how we use this type of technology. All source analysis, obviously. On the right-hand side, movement data. Amy Clark has done an amazing job of being able to show some new patterns and approaches for being able to spatially analyze information like just ad tech data, raw location data, no additional context, no names, no emails, no nothing. But being able to look at that information and start categorizing it and making sense of it so that we're able to understand who's connected to who is co-traveling with who, and where these people loiter at. Phone call analysis is a bit of a slam dunk for the graph, but also being able to bring in things like news articles and social media and critical infrastructure, which I'll be showing live in a little bit. As we talked about that live maritime approach of I'm looking at all the dots on the map that are all the different boats in the area. I want to understand which of these boats should I care about. Understand again, since we are an enterprise capability, this is an example of us doing exactly that with aircraft, bringing in multiple different databases together into the graph so that we have a watch list, organizations on the watch list, and we have aircraft transponders assigned to aircraft, which are assigned to companies. As we create relationships between, let's say, this company and this company, we've created a semantic path, a pattern that analysts might care about, where we ask the question, I want to know if there's any aircraft two, if you will, hops, two relationship hops away from this watch list here. This allows us to look at live sensor data on the right-hand side, as you see here, and be able to enrich it with that connected intelligence information alongside the live spatial analysis that ArcGIS can do. We can turn everything of what you're seeing, we can be delivering this to users through tailored interfaces. First, we have things like our ArcGIS All Source product that is designed to be focused around certain intelligence workflows. But then also inside of any instance of ArcGIS Pro, we have a software development kit, a royalty-free, wide-open software development kit that allows for any analyst, for any of the, on our side, solution engineers, professional services, our partners overseas, to be able to create custom interfaces using ArcGIS Pro. So if you already have your own workflows for how you want to be able to work with this type of data, you're able to do that and have the software bend to you instead of you needing to bend to the software. The last thing that I'd like to highlight, just from an R&D perspective, we have multiple different opportunities for engaging with artificial intelligence and machine learning. One of those is, of course, large language models. This is an R&D aspect for us right now. But what it's heading towards is our ability to be able to make it easier for an analyst to be able to ask a question, behind the scenes, use the AI capability to create the query, and then provide just the answer for it. So with that, I'd like to spend about the next roughly 10 minutes walking through a demonstration of some of the concepts that we were just talking about here together. So
Tim,
oh, yes, ma'am.
if I can just interrupt for a sec, we've got a lot of interest in the chat around extracting entities from unstructured text and how we build that into the graph kind of as we go, both from a data modeling perspective, but also, let's not make it so cumbersome that it that it takes away from the speed and performance that the graph can give us. If
Sure.
you could kind of talk about that or highlight that as you go through your demos, I think that'd be appreciated.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And
Thank you.
thank you. And by the way, I'm I am sharing the screen that I have. So I don't have a I'm not able to watch the chat also. So Amy, thank you so much again for keeping an eye on that. We have a couple of different patterns and practices that we're using on the unstructured side. And just to hit it, just one brief sort of approach on this one, keeping in mind that one enterprise stack can have multiple graphs running at the exact same time. This is where on our side, we would use things like NLP technologies and be able to save that into a graph that's essentially its own standalone graph. As one of the ways to do this. And what's nice about it is you don't end up with the incredibly kludgy, messy, all the different things that NLP or an AI/ML model might be coming back with as a result. So that's one of the ways to just totally sandbox it. And when you see something of interest to you in that other graph, because it's of course searchable, being able to then create that information inside of your other graphs that are a little bit more curated for production use. Or we'll talk a little bit more about unstructured as we go here. So lots of different ways to be able to work with that, but it's a completely real problem. And whomever it is that brought that up, yes, we're happy to talk shop with you on that. So the workflow I want to give you here, what the customer cared about, they wanted to better understand the people who were near critical infrastructure. And they wanted to be able to look for, out of all the people who are running around near critical infrastructure, which of these people should I care about? And you have multiple different types of users. You have link analysis users, you have GIS professionals, and all these groups are trying to find ways to work together. So we start with bringing in a lot of different types of data sets. What used to be feature services, all now being brought into knowledge. On the left-hand side is our data model. We have the entity types, military bases, aircraft, government sanctions programs, different power plants all across the United States. A lot of this data came from Living Atlas and some of it came from customers. And then we have the relationships. These are the things that connect all the different entity types up here. And then down here, it's, by the way, it's supposed to say there's nothing selected in the view. We'll come back to this later and see if we can make it show something. But this is a saved query. This is where people like myself or Amy or some of you who already know how to write a query in something called Cypher, you can create these queries and be able to save them out to the users. So this can be filled with the questions that you want to be able to ask to be able to provide the answers that you have. As a peek under the hood, here's the question that I have and the question the analysts have. Find me any person 2 to 3 degrees away from any government watch list program. And I get into some of the sourcing. That's the question that we have. So the first thing workflow-wise that we have is that we have information on an organization called GW Aerospace. And we have information on a person who's working for this company. And we want to create that relationship. So to begin with, I search for GW Aerospace. It goes through every property, every unstructured document, as you see here. In which case, seeing that GW Aerospace is mentioned as an Iranian supplier of product. As we're looking at this, we can also look at the relationships, and I could right here add in that there's an association to another person, and I could bring the information in through here. I don't need to know GIS. I don't need to know link analysis. As we move over to the link chart, we have plenty of users who want to be able to work, who want to be able to create data live in the link chart. So in this case, I have Karen Perez selected. This is the person that I now know is working for GW Aerospace. I select Karen, connecting it to GW Aerospace. And as we're looking at this information, oh, I apologize, I just had that pop up different. Sorry about that. I'm sorry about this. I have a pop-up that's hiding on me, and I'm going to stop sharing for 1 second so I can go look for it. Amy, can you use this as an opportunity to talk to any questions?
Sure. So there was a question that I really liked. It was, are you able to use image recognition to confirm the Taiwan news report that an aircraft, a specific aircraft was on the airfield at a point in time? And I just wanted to use this as a chance to highlight that, yes, absolutely. If you have tools like image recognition engine or natural language processing is another example, or if there's some kind of spatiotemporal clustering analysis or something that you wanted to do that we have other tools to be able to do, uh, we want you to be thinking of the knowledge graph as another tool in the arsenal. So we can use those other engines or tools. We can point them at the knowledge graph data, or we can point them at data that's sitting outside the graph. And we can take the results of those processes and either use them to directly enrich the graph or use them to help resolve our entities or relationships that are in the graph and essentially make the graph content stronger, more authoritative, more precise, more accurate. There's not going to be a one size fits all answer, but we built knowledge graphs into ArcGIS, right, into this advanced analytics platform in the first place, so that analysts would have access to all of those tools and they would just talk to each other. So if you can get an image recognition engine pointed or talking to ArcGIS, right, any layer in ArcGIS, then yes, we can make it work with the knowledge graph as well. I hope that helps answer the question, and please clarify if not.
Amy, thank you.
Uh,
I apologize for that, everybody. My there is a pop-up that occurs when I go to create the relationship that allows me to pick the relationship that I'm choosing to create between these two people. Unfortunately, it was hiding behind my Teams window, which was thinking it was being helpful and giving me the front mode and staying on top of everything else. So I apologize for that. So we have created this relationship. So this is where in other link analysis systems, it's like, okay, so you drew a line going from Karen Perez to GW Aerospace. Like that is not worth any credit. That is not helpful. So let's get into that. So first, we've created that relationship. Karen works for GW Aerospace. I'm now expanding this out, and I'm able to look at how Karen, through this company, through other intelligence information that we have in the graph, we're able to see the multiple different watch lists that this company is associated with. So in addition to doing the visualization of what you see here, and we have full symbology control, and actually we have extremely powerful symbology relative to some of the other competitors in this area in the market, because all of the power of being able to have symbology broken down by the values of the entities and the relationships that you've already seen us do for feature services, all of that is built into the link analysis capability that you see here. So as we created this relationship right here, as we come back over, you're able to see in the queries that we had, this was the previously empty one. This is the system running that pattern and saying, is there anybody who matches this pattern? And we're able to see, yes, as a matter of fact, there is, and here's the person who matches this pattern. So this relationship that we just created, this relationship was created at the graph enterprise level. Now, all of the other enterprise users who have access to this graph are then also able to see it. And this should have also, excellent, it did. This also created an email alert for me for being able to, I'm going to get to that at the end of the presentation. But again, it's not just about I'm drawing a link chart. We're creating connections between data and being able to analyze that information and deal with it in near real time. So Link Analysis Tim has basically done the job that Link Analysis Tim is able to do. In this case, being able to see how this person relates to these companies, this is about as far as I'm able to go in a traditional link analysis system. But with ArcGIS, we can do a lot more because we can now take into account the spatial. So as we're looking at, as you see on the yellow lines, this is all ad tech data, human movement data. And in that human movement data, we have the suspect that we already found. And we want to be able to understand their relationship to other places, other things. Do they go near critical infrastructure themselves? If so, we care because that's bad. And so the red triangles that you see, these are instances of this person co-traveling with other people. And so frankly, I don't really care so much about that original target. And it turns out they didn't go near critical infrastructure themselves anyways, but they traveled with people. Now I want to understand, well, where did those people go? So as we look at the movement of all the co-travelers, I'm now going to overlay it against critical infrastructure data. This is the same data coming from the knowledge graph right here. So if everything that you're seeing, this is all the exact same data as what we had here. As we're looking at this information, we're also able to run spatial analysis on it. So for all of the nuclear power plants on the eastern seaboard, I want to understand the view sheds of these power plants. I want to know where can you be to be line of sight to part of this critical infrastructure. And so that's a spatial analysis that I'm running on the graph database. But I can also ask other questions. Has any of the co-travelers of my suspect, seen in purple, have any of these people actually been within any of these view sheds? We can see this information and identify the people themselves. So from here, I care about this power plant. And what I want to be able to do now is, given this power plant, I'm going to go add this back to that other suspects layer, to my suspects link chart. And so now, just like you would normally see if you were the link analysis person, I have this random disconnected entity over here, but it's not actually random or disconnected. Because as we select Karen Perez, we're going to do something called a filtered expand. And we're now bringing in that spatial relationship of who did Karen co-travel with. And this lets us see all of the people that she was co-traveling with. And then we can also look at any of these people to understand where they were seen operating nearby. Again, completely spatial relationships. So as we get to here, I'm now able to look at, I have my original source person. I understand them to be dirty because of their connections to financial relationships with other organizations, which go back to watch lists. But I have spatial relationships between them and other people who are also spatially connected to the critical infrastructure that I care about. So this was one of the ways that we could solve the problem. And I mean, quite candidly, it was the slowest way that we could solve the problem, but I wanted to be able to highlight this functionality for you. We could have alternatively done this a little bit quicker. I could have said, given any government watch list, show me any relationship between it and any of this critical infrastructure. So as I select the two entities and I hit the find path button, this goes to the graph and says, hey, graph, show me if there's a way to get from here to there. And there is. I end up with my power plant and then running through the exact same process. But I also might have wanted to look at this from a spatial construct and not just the link analysis construct. So now I'm going to switch over to a geographic link view. So now we have the nuclear power plant, and it's on a spatial perspective now. We zoom out a bit. There we go. So now we're able to see, here's our nuclear power plant. I'm looking at it from a spatial construct. I can select this, and then I can do things like hit expand. Show me what this power plant serves and who's been seen near it. And everything goes to the appropriate spatial location. Now, I did mention earlier when we created that relationship that can be doing other things in the background. In this case, giving me an alert. This alert allows me to open up something called Knowledge Studio. And you can get to this from the enterprise system itself. This is our new web-based capability for being able to do link analysis type work, but doing it in the browser. It's the one-stop shop for any type of search or anything else that you want to be able to look up inside of the knowledge graph. Again, bringing back unstructured documents as well as the entities themselves. You can take those entities and add them onto baseball cards like you're seeing here. but also be able to walk through the relationships to other people, places, and things inside of the baseball card, or taking the link chart perspective. The same thing as what we were already showing. I'm looking at that nuclear power plant. I can select it and expand it in my geospatial construct like we're showing here. Or I could also be looking at this from a traditional link analysis perspective, as shown here. Finally, in addition, and again, this is beta. It's going to be in 11.2. It is the start of our work to have a web-based capability because, again, enterprise capability is critically important to us. We need to be able to support the professional analysts who want to be able to do this work themselves in pro or all source, but we also need to be able to support the people who are going to be the consumer of this type of information. In addition to the web, we have other ways of being able to push this information out. We usually get the question of, hey, what if I don't have a web-based capability? What you're seeing here is a report that was generated from ArcGIS Pro. It's called a layout, and it allows us to take the link chart as well as the map, as well as the table, and be able to present that information in a way that is suitable for offline users. What I also like about it is that it gives us the ability to still let users make changes that they care about to some of the visualizations. So we're in straight up Acrobat Adobe here for looking at the PDF, but we embed the metadata. We embed these as layers for being able to do things like select this one person and get the information that we have on that person. And then finally, for answering the original question that I had also put forward, this is live DC air traffic. And we're able to use the graph to ask out of everything flying, go show me anything that I should care about from the intelligence perspective. In this case, the aircraft connected to a company that's on a government watch list. And we're able to use, again, in this case, GeoEvent server, bringing in live air traffic data, but asking the graph, hey, graph, do you have any aircraft that I should care about? And being able to enrich this. Being able to enrich the live scope dope map perspective that we would be taking with that intelligence information. I know that was a lot to cover, and I hope that I was able to both highlight some of the key functions of what we're doing in ArcGIS Knowledge without making it seem too overwhelming. We're having fantastic luck in some of our adoption with people who would not normally think that they need a GIS, for being able to understand how this can help them out, but also for GIS users that it can be very difficult to try to find ways to connect all the different data sets that they're working with and find ways to join it. And instead, they're understanding that if they leverage this new graph technology, it gives them another way of being able to explore the data themselves. It lets them ask analytics questions that they wouldn't normally be able to ask, like, given these 20 data sets brought into the graph, who is the root of all evil? Who is the person I need to be targeting from a marketing perspective or other? And so I hope that this was helpful for you all. Again, I'm humbled and flattered to have so many people on the call with us here. So thank you so much. If there's any other questions, I guess I could, I'm sorry, Ross, I think over to you for where we go from here, except for the opportunity to hopefully meet a lot of you in the UK in early December.
Correct. Yeah. Thank you, Tim. That was fantastic. And thanks for Amy for your contribution there. I think you've been dealing with all the questions. If there are any questions left, maybe raise your hand or drop it in the chat now and we'll call it out. I think that there's a final one from Sai about different degrees of centrality visualized and how many levels and degrees we can go down. I don't know whether, Tim, that's an easy one to answer or not.
Oh, sure.
Amy can cover.
And in fact, I should just be able to show it. Give me 1 second.
Okay, cool. Thank you. If you're happy. So while you're finding that then, Tim, sorry, Amy, did you want to say something?
No, go ahead, Ross. You're good.
So thank you everyone for your time and attention. I realise we're pretty much close to the hour now. We've been recording this. We'll send out the link when that's been ready, so you can send it on to colleagues who couldn't join today. If you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'll lean back on Tim and Amy from the US to help answer those in the meantime. They will be visiting the UK, like I said at the beginning of the session, in December. So I think the plan currently is to visit kind of the Army Andover site, Army HQ Andover site on the 4th of December for folk who can attend kind of a more land-focused session. We'll have a more general session on open session on the 5th in London, and we'll to be decided to see how many folk are interested in those briefings, and then we'll be looking at defence intelligence focused stuff up in Witten on the 6th. So if you're interested in any of those or want a separate conversation, we're happy to sort that out on a one-to-one basis. So if you reach out to me if you've got interest there, we'll follow that up after the event. But if you, like I say, if you've got any questions or interest in having more detailed discussions with us and with Tim and with Amy, then please just let me know. Tim, you brought something up. You want to quickly touch on that?
Oh, just to briefly touch on it, yes, we have built-in social network analytics inside of ArcGIS Pro. You're able to build out the link chart as you want to see it. This also gives you an opportunity to filter out any other entities that might be a bit of a red herring, and being able to keep those out. And as we're looking at the link chart, as you're seeing here, being able to just select the button centrality brings up everything that you're seeing here, which I know we don't have time for it, but also extensive functionality hidden between these menu items for being able to then to dig in even further on it.
And are there any built-in limitations to the degrees of connectedness you can go down, or is that more hardware dependent?
That's more hardware dependent. And frankly, that is what Graph is really obviously optimized for.
Yeah.
And so we've gotten that question before, and it's because what people are used to from a SQL-based, relational-based perspective is you try to run that like 10 hop out join, and try to run that, like you watch your entire cloud, you watch your cloud bill go up, and you watch everything just kind of grind to a halt. And that is the benefit of Graph. Like that is exactly what Graph does. There's plenty of other things that Graph is not the best technology for, but that right there, that is what Graph is designed for and can really help out with.
Thank you, Tim. Just to extend, I'll expand Amy's response to Anthony about closed systems. Yes, so ArcGIS, it plugs into ArcGIS Enterprise, so that's effectively on-premise private cloud installations. Looks like your MOD, Stratcom. So there are knowledge server licenses already included within the enterprise agreement, MOD's enterprise agreement, and no additional costs. So folk can get started with this sort of stuff straight away. All it needs is time and attention. We've gone past 4. I'm conscious a lot of folks will have more stuff to do. Like I say, if there's any burning questions, drop them in the chat or just email us separately and we'll deal with it offline. Send out the recording when it's ready, and please let us know if you're interested in more detailed discussions, workshops, briefings in early December. But thank you very much for all of your time, and thank you again, Tim and Amy, for running the webinar. Thank you very much.
Ross, thank you so much for setting this up and the work that went into it, and thank you everybody for joining. Look forward to talking with you all soon.
Brilliant. Thanks all. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you all.